Well, hello, avid readers. Trisha Goyer here, and I'm here with Daniel Schwabauer, and we are going to be talking about his book, Operation Grendel, in just a minute, which I loved this book. But first of all, Daniel, welcome, and just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for the kind words about Operation Grendel. I am a nerdy science fiction writer. I've been reading science fiction and fantasy since I was in grade school, and I went to the University of Kansas for 8 years,
Okay.
studied creative writing, and I had the great fortune to study science fiction with James Gunn, and he was very instrumental. Disagree on the worldview completely. But he was very instrumental in helping me to see deeper into science fiction. And as a young man, I started to realize that these genres of science fiction fantasy could be really impacting on the way people think.
Absolutely.
Yes, sort of prophetic genres is what I think. So that kind of made me think if I spend long enough practicing, I could do this professionally. And so here I am all these years later.
Yeah. So, how many books have you written now?
Well, I do nonfiction as well,
Mhm.
so I think I'm on 19 right now.
Okay.
But Operation Grendel was the fourth traditionally published novel. So Maxine Justice, which came out more recently, was number five.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm going to show the cover. If you want to hold up your cover, which is
Yeah.
just gorgeous. I did the audiobook. And the cover is amazing.
Mhm.
Um, and so a couple years ago, I went to Realm Makers for the first time. Never really read science fiction. My two sons love it, adore it. They're like, Mom, you got to read this. You got to read this. I'm like, eh. I was so impressed by the people I met. I wanted to see the award winners. I fell in love with all of it. And I think your book, I listened to it in about 2 days. So it's over the holidays. We have people here, all this stuff. I'm like getting up early. I'm like doing laundry. I'm cooking and I'm listening to it. And it is such a good book. You're always, it's science fiction, but you're trying to figure out what's really going on and who is in charge really and who's playing their hand here and there. And so it was a book that definitely kept me on my toes. And when I got done, I wanted to start all over again and listen to it again because it was like you were able to pull it off. And I just wanted to like take that journey again. So well done. It was definitely one of my favorite books from last year.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I'm delighted. I mean, obviously, any writer wants to hear that someone liked their book, but that was really the kind of the goal with this was without giving away spoilers to really make people think
Mm-hmm.
and have to kind of the journey to kind of have to reprocess the journey. So I mean, I don't know if you want to hear about it, but
Yes, I would love to. Yes.
it started because I went on my own 3 year journey of studying the era of yellow journalism, working
Mm-hmm.
on a curriculum, and it was so enlightening to me because I'm reading these stories from the 1870s to the early of 1922 about, and it just struck me that wow, we're in another era of yellow journalism. It's just
Mm-hmm.
digital now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's more powerful because instead of getting a newspaper once a day, it's 24/7 in front of us, and that led me down this rabbit hole of propaganda
Yeah.
and um, psychological warfare. And I started thinking, because I think in science fiction terms, I'm always looking for angles. And I
Yeah.
thought, what if, I mean, they're doing this AI stuff and Neuralink with Elon Musk was working towards their announcement. I actually wrote the first draft of this before Neuralink announced that they had the robotic arm or whatever. But I thought, what would psychological warfare look like in the future, implementing techniques from journalism, which they've been doing for 100 and some years? What would that look like with integrated AIs and transhumanism? And pieces started clicking in my head, like, well, this would make it really hard to tell what's true and what isn't,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? I mean, it would make it really difficult. And then what if, how do you tell that story? So the other part of this is that it's a military science fiction story, which I love military sci-fi, but I've never been in the army or I've never been in the armed services. So I've never felt qualified to write that sort of story, but I do know something about journalism.
Yes.
And so I had the idea, what if I told a military sci-fi story from the embedded reporter, only instead of the reporter following around the soldiers are following around the reporter.
Mm-hmm.
If the reporter were the story, and this is the world to do it in, where the reporter doesn't actually know necessarily what's true and what isn't, and those ideas, then I just started thinking, well, I wonder if the reader could be in that kind of upside down, how do I know what's true and what isn't?
Exactly. Then you're like, okay, I think I figured it out. Then you're like, wait, no, that can't be true. And then even some imagery you have, and it's like, then they realize it's not true. It's just like in the AI aspect, like you were talking about, it was one that you have to definitely pay attention, but you just wanted more. I just wanted to like hear the next thing. What was going to happen next? Who was going to show up? Is that person really there? I mean, so many things were there. And the AI aspect remind me of that Fahrenheit. What is it? Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451, yeah.
And I remember I haven't read that since 7th or 8th grade, but the interaction with the walls, and that almost becomes your family. And the AI is that comfortable presence is always there. And I'm like, I could really see how people can get connected to that. I mean, we see people, media, and my kids, I'm always like, you're on the electronics too much, but I can see that can be their comfort zone in their world, and that they interact more comfortably with that world than even the real world around them. So that was a fascinating aspect.
What's fascinating to me is I was intending to write this as a warning, not like a heavy-handed one, but sort of like, we might be seduced by what we love, not by what we fear. The way we go give in might be because we just like it so much.
Yeah.
It's not that it's forcing us. And I was invited to speak at a book club a couple of months ago, and it was a delightful time. I enjoyed talking to the people. It was a small group, and I was just like candidly talking about this aspect of being synced with an AI, and what if it's lying to us, but what if we don't care, kind of like the Matrix or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's giving our monkey brain exactly what we want, and would we mind? And one of the people there, which I really appreciated, I don't think I'm throwing this person under the bus at all, like she said, well, if I could just have an AI serve my monkey brain, I'd probably do it. And I thought, well, that's honest, and it's creepy.
Yeah.
Exactly as creepy as I wanted the book to feel. Not in a like it's not a horror novel or anything.
Right. No. Yeah.
Like, how much resistance do I have to the thing telling me what I want to hear, even though I know it's not true? And what if those lines get blurred so much that I can no longer tell?
Right. And there's parts in the book where it's like, is this really happening? Is this in the AI? I don't know what's happening. And those were fascinating elements. And I mean, the whole AI aspect of the AI knows you so well that you're going to enjoy this, you're going to like this, or this voice is going to come through. It's just this whole thing that it's almost like we can see that this could not be too far away. The way technology is just going right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's I don't know how deep, our audience wants to hear about this. And I'm just, it's speculative fiction, so I'm speculating here. But the journey that I've taken in thinking about all of this has led me in some ways to kind of take seriously the culture and what's happening, for instance, with Neuralink, very seriously, and to contrast, for instance, and again, this is totally speculative. I'm not making any kind of theological case like this must be true, but I believe that biblically the church is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I think you can establish that really easily in the New Testament. But there's this holy place of God being the one who is actually the one who can see our innermost being, right? And it makes me wonder if the contrary theme is the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place. Is that a physical place? Or is that an AI wired to the human brain, making it impossible for us to have a moment of silence internally?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? We're like,
it is so true because, they're especially young people today. They can go all day with not even having one moment of silence.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and imagine if it's just hardwired,
Yeah.
where we're connected to some quantum AI, which the technology isn't. I mean, it's there in a rough form, but I don't think it's going to be another 30 years before we. I mean, this year they're doing the live trials on humans.
Yeah.
So, is this 5 or 10 years away? How integrated will it be, and how soon? I mean, I don't know. But to me, it's just all of a sudden the technology seems like there could be another presence in our internal like thought life, whatever that is, that we don't have control over. And to me, it's a little scary as someone who believes in a creator and that relationship being
Yes.
that's the sacred, that's the holy place. And now there's something unholy there that it's like, how do you get rid of it?
Yeah.
Can you just rip it out of the back of your head if it's Neuralink or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what it's so cool is, so like people may be saying, well, I don't read science fiction, I don't know, but reading it, it was a captivating story with interesting characters and lots of, I mean, it wasn't like that. It was like, oh, this is too much science fiction, I can't follow anything that's happening. You know what I mean? It was just like, you care about the characters, you want to know what's going to happen, you see these warnings and these problems, and you just want to see what's going to happen. Like, it's this gonna, anyway, I don't want to give too much away, it's so hard. Anyway, so you see the looming problem coming, and are your characters going to get swept away in it? So you care about the people. It's not just like, I think that's one of the things that why I didn't read like science fiction and fantasy. You think it's going to be too technological, and but you could take this story
Yeah.
and place in a different time, and it's still like the moral ethics and the questions and the what are we going to submit to. Um, all those types of questions are there. So the characterization and those internal thoughts and the morals and all those questions are still there, but it's just wrapped in a science fiction AI world with galaxies and all these this
Yeah.
bigger things are at play, but it's still this personal story of this character that you think you know, and sometimes you don't know what's going on. So it's fun to follow that journey.
I appreciate you saying that because I do get interested in the ideas of it, but
Mm-hmm.
to me, I don't have a book just because I have an idea. The only thing that makes a story work for me is the people.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, even though I find concepts fascinating, I don't really like reading hard science fiction. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I realize the genius of people like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke is apparent, but their stories don't captivate me the way the stories of Ray Bradbury did.
Yeah.
I really like Bradbury. I like Heinlein. They're all flawed for one reason or another, and I don't agree with many of their worldviews. But what the ones that I love did is they told me stories about people, and the people just were the door. They weren't an excuse for an idea. They weren't
Yes.
just an idea with a hat and trousers or whatever. They
Right.
were people that seemed like they had a real human personality, human desires, and so I what captivated me about the idea for the book, it's like I had the idea for these things, but it wasn't until I realized there was a character that I cared about, Raymond Dahl, and then the other characters started, as a writer, they started
Yeah.
walking into my imagination and
You're
just
like, what are you doing there?
yeah, yeah, like this isn't, you weren't in my outline. Why are you here? And then it becomes obvious why they're there as you write, if you're willing to follow them around.
Yeah, exactly. So the book again, if you're jumping on midstream, is Operation Grendel. And I'll just going into with the characterization. There's one scene um, where they're able to record important moments in their lives, and issues happen, and he's upset, and he starts deleting these moments from his AI. And it was like I had tears in my eyes thinking about the just we're able to capture, first of all, that we're able to capture those moments, and then realizing just the hurt and the pain that you are so hurt that you would delete those precious moments. I'm trying to say it without giving too much away, but the characterizations and the interactions that you displayed that were in his memories were just so beautifully done. It was like it's very much rich characters in the midst of this science fiction setting. So that was one scene I'm like, oh, that was so well done. I really enjoyed that part.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's my goal as a writer is always to tell the truth. In fact, this is a little I don't know how this will sound to the audience, but it was like one of the most meaningful. I've gotten a lot of letters, but one of them right after the book came out was from a military journalist, and
Mm.
he it was a fairly personal letter, but one of the things that I really appreciated about it was that, I mean, it shocked me. He said, "Thank you for telling the truth,"
Wow.
and yeah, it was like I wasn't expecting that,
Hmm.
you know, because I don't think the truth is just here's this large issue that we need to address. I think the truth is actually more about those sort of quiet human moments where we're like deleting a memory of something super meaningful because it's too painful.
Yeah.
And we can't quite do that the same way that you can when you just, tell your AI to delete it and you don't want to have to deal with it anymore. But I suspect we do something like that at
Hmm.
times where we just refuse to face things or whatever. We have our own ways of getting around them. And sometimes probably a counselor would say that they're still there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
We'll
you
wipe
can
them
delete
off the
it.
hard drive. They're
Like,
still
you can
living
delete
there.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so
So I
good.
appreciate that. It's fun. Writing for me is always an exploration of the people.
Hmm.
And I usually, I mean, I don't know that I ever plan things like that. I have to discover them along the way. And sometimes they're painful to me
Hmm.
as the writer. So if this isn't too much detail for people, there are times writing this book when as a writer, I'm sitting there realizing something about a character's background. I'm like, okay, I can't go upstairs because I'm crying right now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
just realized something, and I feel like an idiot because I'm sitting in a room alone, writing about imaginary people, and it's moving me emotionally.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so, but I think that's just our desire to connect with other people.
Yeah.
As human beings, we were made for connection.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so this book won a Realm Award from the Realm Makers Conference for science fiction, and then also the audiobook won too, and then it was a nominee for Book of the Year. So congratulations, all that. I
Oh,
mean,
thank
to get the books out there, it's always like you're always curious, like, what are people going to think? And then when people are like, you won awards. Obviously, they loved it. To know that it's that level. What is it like to see that all that hard work is pays off and people are appreciating the stories that you put out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I told you before we started recording, I'm always grateful when anybody even takes the time to read
Hmm.
something that I've written. And obviously, books hit people a different way. Not everybody loves everything that you write, but it's a little surprising. I've been writing long enough now. My expectations aren't fame and fortune and glowing reviews and all of that. It's just
Yeah.
trying to tell the truth as best I can and let go of any expectations. And so I had no clue that the book was even anywhere in the running for this. I wasn't going to Realm Makers last year. So it was actually a former student who texted me and said, "You don't know this is happening, do you? You're not here." And I was like, "What? What's happening?" And it's obviously it's gratifying. But to me, the big thing, as much as I appreciate the awards, is the something like a letter where someone says,
Hmm.
"Man, this really moved me and made me rethink some things." Those are always, it's like I don't know what to say. I don't know how to even process that. One more anecdote: before this book even came out, I was invited to a former student's to have dinner with the former. I teach writing, so it was a student and her father and mother, and we were talking about the book and what I was doing with it, and he's nodded and he asked me lots of questions. We talked about it for probably an hour and a half. At the end, he said, "That's really interesting. That was my job. My job was to get stories in the newspapers as part of a military intelligence psychological warfare." Um,
Wow.
I had no idea. And so then I started asking him
Yeah.
questions.
And you're like, wait, did I get this
Hey,
right?
you're a resource here. So tell me more, but that kind of accidental, how do you tell the truth in a way that you're not expecting it to impact someone in these different ways. And then they tell you it did. And you go,
Yeah.
wonderful.
That is so cool. I love that. I love that. Okay, so what are you working on now? Do you have another novel in the works or something else that we can look forward to?
Yes and no. I'm working on a dissertation right now, which is taking a lot of time and energy.
Yes.
Um, I I have a plan. I have a an outline. I've begun working on another book in the Maxine Justice world.
Okay, yep.
So that's the next novel that I'm planning, but it keeps getting sidetracked by dissertation things. So I mean, I am working on it, but so don't tell Steve that I'm behind.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
he
he's
won't.
watching this video right now.
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
Well, good. So we can look forward to that. And then you mentioned teaching, which is something that I know that you do. I mean, in person and then also through curriculum. So explain a little bit about that. And I think the cool thing that I see, because I work with a lot of young people too, is just the brilliance of these young people and their imaginations. I just do I do at least once a month with the Young Writers Workshop with Brett Harris and Kara Swanson, and we do little writing things in just an hour's time, and the stuff that they come up with, I'm like, that's some really good writing. I mean, so what do you see as you're working with students and their writing?
Well, we've primarily worked with high school students. It's a company called Clearwater Press, one-year adventure novel, cover
Yes.
story, byline. So the age group that I've worked with has been mostly teenagers, but also young into their 20 to 27, probably is about the oldest. Um, and I'm not just saying that as a commercial, it's the noticing trends.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't mean this as an insult to older people, but it is interesting that when you're younger and you don't know anything, you tend to be more receptive to weird, strange ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love working with young people because of that, because they seem to be willing to like just stretch their imagination. And on that topic, I don't know what to do with this because I'm not a psychologist, but it does seem like because of the advent of screens and kids getting lost in their phones,
Mm-hmm.
it's had in some ways a detrimental impact on the use of language, but in other ways it's made imaging. They think in images more than my generation,
Mm-hmm.
than even early millennials, the Gen X. I'm a Gen Xer.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
like we for 500 years we've been left hemisphere language heavy, and so we've relied a lot on. I'm getting into the weeds probably, but like this generation, these young people do think in images in ways that are they're more quick with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a fantastic trend even for fiction, even though I say, well, the language is harder, but no, they can do it. They're just more quick to jump to precise images. So, who knows? I don't feel qualified to predict where that's going. But it is cool to see. I think there's a whole group of young writers
Yeah.
who are being nurtured, and I think we might see an explosion of really cool stories, not just in novels, but in movies and games and whatever platforms. We may see an explosion of that in the next 10 to 15 years.
I really think so too. Just even with these students that I work with online and then meeting stuff at homeschool conferences. And I love how you say, like, you just tell them what to do and they do it. You know, I've done quick workshops at homeschool conferences and then they'll come and talk to me at the booth. And I'm like, okay, this is how you self-publish. And I'm like, this is, maybe an hour total of bits and pieces that I give them. And the next conference they show up and they hand me a book and they did it and they
Yeah,
followed what I said. And I was like, this is amazing. But
yeah,
they have tools and resources that we didn't dream of having.
right.
They do what you say, they listen and follow through, and it's pretty cool to see. And then just in our own house, when my three oldest kids are 33, 30, and 28, they'll talk about Brandon Sanderson or books they're reading or movies, and they will sit there for an hour talking about characterization and plot and theme. And I mean, they did grow up in my house, but it's just like,
Yeah,
the conversations they have and the level of I see there's a lot of young people, the level of understanding story and what works and what doesn't work. And this is what was going wrong with the DC universe. I just heard this whole conversation, whatever. They
yeah,
just know all these things. And it's like, I agree with you that I think there is going to be an explosion of all this creative thinking and building, and they're getting the tools now. I think we're just going to see a lot of books coming out that are going to be very good quality, that we can be looking forward to.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say one thing, like, I think there's almost a renaissance of storytelling that where it's already started. And I
Yeah.
think the platforms and the foundations are being set for it to really expand. My concern with it is that because my thinking has changed on this, I used to think that if I trained people to understand the principles of storytelling, that young people would be better gatekeepers of their minds. I still believe that's true, but the problem is not always the mind. A lot of times it's the heart, and you can understand all the storytelling techniques, and if your heart is still not submitted to,
Ooh.
to like the tree of life rather than the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we'll say, you can know all the techniques and you'll still happily jump in to the pool and let Ivy control you.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
will let your monkey brain just be the thing that you're serving.
Oh,
And
that's good.
um, so I'm as hopeful as I am. I also have there's this part of me that wants to be the grandpa and go, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
but
No,
the real thing is the human heart.
that's so good. I know I've read, just you hear about these books and everyone's reading them, and then I'll go and I'm like, this has so much promise, and then there's no spiritual theme. It just is darkness triumphs at the end and stuff. It's just, and I feel so icky afterwards, and I'm like, yes, that was a good writing, but there was such a redemption story that they almost got there. It's like they don't know how to get there, and
Yeah.
so they can't get there because spiritually it's not in them. And so many times I read these bestsellers that everyone's talking about, I'm like, they could have done so much with that, but if they don't have it in them, if they don't have that spiritual life and that light and that truth in them, they don't know how to get there. And so every time I've like, I gotta see what everyone's raving about, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just like at the end, it just dies because
or
they don't have what we have, and the truth that we have to share.
or they actually, they're probably trying to tell the truth, but they believe that there's no redemption.
Yeah,
And so they're trying to find something in the midst of a story arc that doesn't work. Redemptive arc doesn't work if there's no redemption. How do I use it as much as I can and get what I can out of it? But in the end, we're just, walking meat puppets or whatever. And like your worldview matters to whether stories can work. And I always tell people stories are buckets for meaning. And if you don't believe ultimate meaning exists, your stories are going to be extremely limited. So I agree with you. It's one of the things that frustrated me about studying science fiction in college was like, there's a lot of empty stories here, well told, but in the end, it's just emptiness.
Yeah. And that's why one thing I love about Enclave Publishing, that there's that spiritual arc, and sometimes it's stronger in some books, and sometimes but the author's worldview is going to come through, even if there's not a huge spiritual awakening at the end of the book. The author's worldview is there, and truth is shared, and meaning is shared, and morals are shared. And so a lot of times people say, I think with this book, I think I've mentioned it before, and people are like, how old? And I said, like, 12-year-old. I would not have a problem handing this to a 12-year-old. There's war. If they don't mind a scary creature in part of the book, but whatever, there's elements, but there's nothing in there that's going to be, like bad or there's cursing or all those, whatever. It's clean, it's interesting. If they can follow the story, 12 years old, 13 years old totally can get caught up in this book.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It's not marketed for young adults, but I certainly don't want to put a book in the hands of a 13-year-old that would defile their imagination or something.
Right, exactly.
But it's hard to write military science fiction without some shooting and
exactly
some violence, in the story that's integral to the plot.
Yeah. And I say that about my World War II novels. I'm like, there's war, and they're in concentration camps. So if your child, they're like, my child reads this and that, I'm like, they're good then. They're good. If they're reading Lord of the Rings or whatever, they'll be fine. So it's good. Okay, so one last question is there any books that you've enjoyed recently that you could tell us about?
There's one. I mean, there's lots of books I can tell you about because I'm in this doctoral program and I'm just being all these books are being thrown at me, and some of them are delightful, but they're not things you talk about on
Yeah.
a speculative fiction program. So I did sneak one book for pleasure in last year. It was
Oh, right.
Daniel Nayeri's book. It's called Everything Sad is Untrue, a true
Mm.
story. And it's published as a novel. So it
Mhm.
says like Everything Sad is Untrue, a novel, or a true story, a novel is what it was what it
Oh,
said.
yeah.
That book was just very moving
Mm.
and very insightful. And I don't have a problem recommending it. It actually is quite provocative in a way in terms of the imagination and what he says about storytelling and his own journey as an immigrant to the United States
Mm.
from the Middle East and how his like faith journey or whatever. It's just fascinating. It's a fascinating take on stories and life, and he's very raw about what life has been like for him. It's well worth reading. I
That
enjoyed it a lot.
that sounds really good. Well, where can people find more information about you and all the books that you've written?
I have a website, author website, danschwabauer.com, which doesn't exactly roll off the tongue or lend itself to remembering. It's because you have to remember how to spell my name.
Yeah.
You can also get there from clearwaterpress.com, which is our curriculum website, and there's links there to that. So
Yeah. And the book again, hold it up again so they can see, and I'll hold up
yeah,
the book.
props to Kirk
Operation.
DuPont for a great cover.
Yeah, he always does such great covers, such great
Yeah.
work. Yeah, but well worth the read. I enjoyed it so much. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation and the kind words. I'm glad you liked it.